Welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Alex Kramer. It's now time to get caught up with some rapid reactions. Well, Mikhail Gorbachev, the last Soviet Union leader who transformed the international landscape around him and assisted former President Ronald Reagan in ending the Cold War, has died at the age of 91. Now, people are remembering the leader by sharing Reagan's iconic 1987 speech where he addressed him directly.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
World leaders like Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, is calling him a towering global leader and a tireless advocate for peace who changed the course of history. And President of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, also called him a trusted and respected leader, saying, quote, "It opened the way for free Europe." And citizens who lived through that era also remember him fondly, like this reaction. If you grew up from the 1950s to 80s, you lived in permanent fear of a nuclear war. Gorbachev changed that, a truly great man. And something else people are remembering that Gorbachev famously did, his allowance of companies like Pizza Hut to enter into Russia, creating one of the, quote, greatest commercials of all time.
Это Горбачев.
Горбачев.
Да благодаря ему у нас есть Pizza Hut.
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
Pizza Hut. All right. Rob.
Yeah, it just speaks to the man. Mikhail Gorbachev. Alex, thank you. For more on his life and legacy, let's welcome in former NSC Chief of Staff and America First Policy Institute Senior Fellow Fred Fleitz. Fred, good morning. Great to have you back on.
Good morning.
Fred, just want to get your reaction to the passing of Mikhail Gorbachev yesterday at the age of 91. He was the president of the former USSR for 7 years, and he had an impact that was unlike maybe anyone else going back to Stalin in the Second World War. What was your first reaction when you heard the news?
Well, Gorbachev had a complicated legacy. George Will, the top pundit of the Reagan years, said in a new op-ed, like Christopher Columbus, who accidentally discovered America, Gorbachev stumbled into history by misunderstanding where he was going. Bear in mind, Gorbachev believed in Lenin and Marx. The economic and political reforms he initiated were not to bring down the Soviet Union or break it up or let Eastern Europe go. It was to fix the Soviet Union. It was to fix its economy, which had been devastated by the war in Afghanistan, by incredible corruption, and he knew he could not keep up with Reagan's defense spending. Now, he deserves a lot of credit because he didn't believe in violence. He did not use violence when, well, he did in two instances, in Lithuania and in Georgia when they tried to break away. But generally, he did not believe in violence to stop these states from breaking away from the Soviet Union. But he was someone who believed in Marx and Lenin. His legacy is complicated.
He didn't want a nuclear exchange with the United States or any of these breakaway states, including Ukraine, by the way. We have Ukraine because of the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s. What is his legacy, do you think, now as we look back? Was his 7 years a success? Because the policies of Gorbachev and the policies of Vladimir Putin vastly different, and the two didn't really get along either.
Well, for whatever the reasons were, whatever Gorbachev intended, I think we have a safer world right now that the Soviet Union, a deadly totalitarian state. I mean, I grew up during the Cold War, and we were worried about nuclear war in the Soviet Union.
Right.
That is over. But it's fairly clear that Putin detests Gorbachev because he broke up the Soviet Union. And there was a recent poll that said Gorbachev had a favorable rating of only 8% among Russians because they blame him for the loss of the greatness of the USSR and the hard times they've had in the transition to democracy and a market economy.
Fred, I want to show you an interview our Newsmax CEO, Christopher Ruddy, did with Gorbachev in 2011 in Moscow, in Gorby's offices there to mark the 100th anniversary or the 100th birthday of Ronald Reagan. The two were so close, Reagan and Gorbachev. Take a listen.
I am simply amazed by the transformation, the energy, the new life here.
We did all we could in order to put an end to the totalitarian regime, to put an end to the Stalinist system.
How does that contrast with where Russia is right now 10 years later?
Gorbachev was a strong critic of Putin. Now, I mean, one thing Gorbachev deserves credit for, he released Soviet Jews, he restored human rights, he let Solzhenitsyn out of prison. I mean, he did incredible things in terms of promoting democracy and human rights in the country. You know, as I said, he's a complicated character. Putin is moving in the wrong direction, and I understand that on his deathbed, Gorbachev was lamenting the fact that Putin is reversing all the good he tried to do for the country.
Yeah, one of the towering figures of the late 20th century. Fred Fleitz, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate your perspective and expertise. Good to see you.